Welcome to this last video of my coffee bar build series. If you've gotten something useful out of these videos, I hope you consider subscribing to my channel. Go on, click the button, it's down there somewhere. In this video, I'll be spraying the finish. I'm going to start with some coffee brown trans-tint dye mixed with polyurethane on the top. I'll spray the drawers with just straight polyurethane. And then I'm going to prime the whole cabinet with some Sticks bonding primer and spray 2 coats of General Finishes Antique White Milk Paint. So the order of operations is going to be, I'll do the top first, and then I'll do all of the drawers and I'll get those out of the garage, and then I'll start spraying the paint. But up first is the top. Ooh. Okay, so we're going to revise that. I have no idea what I was thinking, but I started with a tablespoon of trans-tint dye to half a cup of varathane polyurethane, which is way too much dye. I should have started with a quarter or half a teaspoon of dye to a cup or more of poly. I revised the mix a couple of times and ended up using a tablespoon of trans-tint dye to 2.5 cups of the polyurethane. And this is why I start on the bottom. Once this dries, I can sand it back just a little bit and then touch up around the edges, because those you'll see if you're looking underneath it. I didn't spray the bottom because I didn't want to get any poly in the inserts that hold the tabletop to the cabinet. I have more control with the foam brush and no one will see it anyway. This little pop-up spray tint is good for smaller things, especially when you can put them on a turntable. But it's too small for this top and it makes spraying the sides and the ends really challenging. I'm scuff sanding between coats using a 3M sanding pad. This is only using the weight of my hand as I don't want to remove the dye I just sprayed. I ended up taking down the pop-up spray tint as it was just too small. I threw a piece of plastic on my work surface, put the tabletop on my turntable, and I'm just spraying in the open. This was a much better spraying experience. As I refill my cup in between coats, I add more poly to the mix, diluting the dye. I find doing this adds depth to the color. For this final coat of poly, I'm using a wide spray pattern and I've opened up the fluid control knob to spray a heavier coat. With the top done, I can move on to the drawers. The pop-up spray tint is back because I have my garage door open and I want to prevent the breeze from blowing crap in my finish while spraying. I'm using some 320 grit sandpaper to scuff sand the surfaces. It takes away any of the little bumps and also gives the next coat of poly something to grab onto. One of the things I really like about my Fuji Semi-PRO 2 is how easy it is to clean. I'm using my mini cups to spray some water through the system to clean it out. After going through a couple of cups of water, I'll break the gun down and rinse the parts off in my utility sink. So if you're using water-based finishes, you definitely want to pre-raise the grain and sand it one time before you start putting your finish on it. There's nothing wrong with doing a scuff sand in between your finishes to take off anything that dried on your surface. However, you don't want to be taking off the material that you just put on because the grain all raised up, and now you've got a really rough feeling finish. And the only way to deal with that is by sanding it down. So a lot better to sand it down before you start applying your coats of finish, which are a lot more expensive than water. I'm just using paper towels and a foam brush to spread the water. It dries pretty fast in my garage, and I am running my dehumidifier right now. So I've gotten the humidity down to around 53%. I'm using a 2x10 on top of a couple sawhorses to put all of the parts. I'm going to spray right on top of the cabinet, and I'm going to put my turntable on top of that, and then I'll spray there, and then I'll put all the parts to dry over on the 2x10. I'm going to roll the inside of the cabinet first. I'm going to do that because I don't think I can get my sprayer in there very well, and I think I'll end up just spraying crap everywhere on the inside of it. So they're pretty tight areas, especially where the drawers are. I'm using my Graco airless to spray the primer. I really like not having to thin the primer, and the Graco does a great job. However, I should have been using one of the FFLP tips and laying down thinner coats, as I'm going through a ton of primer. Refilling the Graco in the middle of spraying is really easy. Take off the cup, unscrew the lid, add some more paint, put it back together. You're ready to go. I switched over to cardboard from the plastic wrap to cover the tabletop. The dried paint on the plastic wrap was peeling off, and I was afraid it was going to get into the wet paint that I was spraying. The cardboard just seemed like a better solution, and it was a lot easier to manage. I don't have much primer left, and I'd like to finish up priming without visiting the paint store, so I'm going to go ahead and brush and roll 2 coats of primer on the bottom. It takes way longer, not really any fun, but I do use a lot less primer. With 2 coats of the primer done, it's time for another round of sanding and dusting before moving on to the milk paint. I can cover the large flat surfaces with my sander pretty quickly. It's just all of the corners and the edges that take a lot of time. It's a lot of work to sand and dust between each coat, but they all build on each other, and if you have overspray or air bubbles or dust and don't sand it out, it'll just keep getting worse as subsequent layers build on it. Keeping a smooth surface as you add layers is far easier than dealing with a problem after it's been covered up by a couple layers of primer and paint. You hear it all the time, but I think it's really true. Painting is all about prep. With the primer and the sanding done, I can finally move on to the milk paint. Just going to make sure that I've got all the dust cleaned off of everything before I start. I can't get my sprayer in these 2 small drawer spaces, so I'm going to go ahead and just put the paint on with a brush and a roller, just like I did with the primer. For spraying the paint, I'm thinning it 10%, and I'll be using the 2.0 cap set. So I'm getting ready to put the final coats of the milk paint on furniture, and a couple of things I noticed the last time I was spraying. First of all, if you have one of these whip hoses, I've noticed over time that mine is getting little cuts in it, and those basically reduce the amount of air coming out. So anytime you feel that, it's probably worth just feeling up and down the hose and twist it a little bit to make sure that you're getting as much airflow as you can out. That's one of the key things, especially with the smaller Semi-PRO 2. I found one on this back end when I was spraying behind the cabinet because I happened to have the whole thing wound up like this, and I felt the air coming out of my hand. So I think in the future I'm just going to go ahead and just keep feeling it. Once I get too many of them, I'll just order another hose. The other thing that's worth noting is that having extra filters is really handy, because at the end of the spraying day, when you're cleaning out your gun, you can just clean out the filters, and if you have two sets, you always have a clean set in your turbines. That just makes things go a little bit faster, and you don't have to worry about anything drying. The turbines do move a lot of air, and you can see that what I was spraying is coming right through, oops, this way, is getting caught at the front of the filter, and it prevents it from going in. So that's the back, this is the front. So it's certainly worth having a couple of extra filters that allows you to keep going. And so even while I'm spraying, if I notice that they're getting like they look like that, then I might change them out if I still have more spraying to do during the day. I don't like the idea of restricting the air going in there, and I don't like the idea of having crap get in the turbine. Well, that'll wrap up this coffee bar project. If you like to build things but you hate finishing, do yourself a favor and get a sprayer. A decent HVLP or airless makes finishing so much easier, and you get amazing results without too much effort. I hope you found something useful in my coffee bar build series and will subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.